Hey, folks. So, me and all my background locations, once my legal situation gets worked out and I have my own place again, and I'm not staying with family, my backgrounds will be a little more consistent. But, anyhow, I want to make this video discussing the opioid epidemic and my proposed solution. I made a video with the same perspective years ago on my personal Facebook page. And the overwhelming, reaction was positive and supportive, and people were in agreement. However, I did, in fact, incur a drug-related felony charge via the state. And when that happened, everyone was like, oh, who's this lady to talk about drugs if she's a drug dealer? First off, those charges were dismissed because there was no evidence because I wasn't a drug dealer, and those charges never accused me of being a drug dealer. However, due to some circumstances that had really nothing to do with me, my former co-defendant, one of my co-defendants on the state case, the feds picked up his charges. He did not get the amount of time that some people felt he should have got, and as a result, the feds came after me. It's just a domino effect of professional courtesies, and so now I pled out to a federal felony. That is use of a communications facility to facilitate drug trafficking. So I say that to say, before anyone else tries to jump on and go, your opinion's invalid because you're a drug dealer. No one's ever accused me of being a drug dealer. The drug case that I was involved in got dropped. And then, like I said, the feds end up picking up charges, and basically, it's the charges is calling me an accessory to drug dealing, not an actual drug dealer. Just to clarify and ease the air. And in addition, the original video I did on this topic on my social media page, when I was arrested, there's another woman locally, I live in a small town, that has the same name as me, first and last, 20 years, or 10 years younger, a little over 10 years younger than me, and actually was a drug addict. So, the local news mistaked me and her, because we're only two people with this name locally, and they put her age instead of my age. And all the people that knew her from her drugging days, which as far as I know, she's clean, she's doing well, I'm very happy for her, made comments about doing drugs with me because apparently they're still on drugs. Because if you look at her and you look at me, I'm easily 10 plus years older than her, 100 plus pounds heavier than her. How you could mistake the two of us, you got to be on something. So I just want to put all that out there before the naysayers show up with all their nonsense. So that's all addressed up front. But this is my solution for the opioid epidemic. I live in a small town in West Virginia. The heart of the opioid crisis. And like pretty much everybody here, I've had friends and family, that have died from drug overdoses. I've had friends and family who I've tried to take in to get off drugs, and, had to figure out at what point was I enabling and at what point was I actually helping. And ultimately, I have had to cut ties with people because they just were not going to stop being drug addicts. And like most people, I've had friends and family who have went to prison for selling drugs, who, may or may not be active drug dealers, whatever, So I understand both sides of this coin very, very well. And if anything, if a person was a drug addict or a drug dealer, I would think they would be more in a position to speak on the topic than someone who considers himself a sainted whatever above all flaw, in relation to this. So here's my thought. We know that drug addiction comes from a lot of underlying issues. Sometimes it's mental illness. I would say most people who are into drugs heavy, if they weren't mentally ill prior to their drug use, at some point during their drug use, they become mentally ill. We know that a lot of people are homeless, and the homeless culture, at least in this area, is very much, infused with the drug lifestyle for addicts. We know that, most of the time people who sell drugs, are people who don't really see themselves with many options in life outside of selling drugs, and they're not horrible, mean people that are like, oh, I want to poison and kill people or do bad things. No, they're people who see a unregulated good, just like a knockoff handbag, and they see a market for it. And they see an opportunity to go from someone who has pretty much nothing financially or would work their self to death for little to nothing, to being a person who now has an opportunity to make extremely lucrative, profits by selling unregulated goods. Because that's what drug dealers are. They're people who sell unregulated goods. You know, they're on tax, they're unregulated. And when you put it in the context of like a person who sells knockoff handbags, because that's really, it's probably, and I'm sure it's just as much, you know, malice involved. You know, it's just as nefarious in intention. It's really kind of wild when you see mandatory minimums for drugs. You know, you're going to put someone in prison for 10 or 20 years or the rest of their life because they sold unregulated goods. You know, it's not like, you know, you see on TV where, you know, drug dealers are outside middle schools handing out samples trying to get kids addicted. It's not like that. You know, the drug addicts actively pursue the drug dealers to an aggressive extreme. You know, you can stop selling drugs, and for months or years, drug addicts will still approach you. So as you're trying to live a legal life, and you're trying to not go to prison, and you're trying to do something different, you know, you're going to go through the same struggles that I go through, that you go through, that everybody goes through financially, where you go through difficult times. And during these times, the drug addicts you used to sell to are going to be nipping at your heels, you know, basically offering to throw insane amounts of cash at you if you would just sell them drugs. And the reality is not everybody has the willpower to turn that down. And I'm not saying drug addicts are victims. I'm not saying drug dealers are victims. I'm saying let's put it in reasonable perspective. I also am not a person who believes that, you know, is drug addiction a mental illness? Sure. But whenever you speak down on drug addicts, you know, the addiction community goes, well, everybody's an addict to something. You know, to try to make drug addicts more relatable or excusable. But in our reality, if you're going to say everyone's an addict to something, then that means everyone should get the same free pass, the same consideration, the same smack on the hand for criminal conduct as drug addicts, because we're all an addict of something, right? Personally, I believe in personal accountability. You know, if you choose to sell drugs, you know the risk you're taking. You know, you've weighed those risks and you've chose to sell drugs. And unfortunately, you know, if worst case scenario, you may have to pay the piper. And it's the same thing for drug addicts. If you choose, I've never done hard drugs. I've never done heroin, crack, meth, not even cocaine. I say not even because I'm from, you know, I grew up in the 90s where a lot of people recreationally did coke. But I've never done these things because I know that even one time doing these things, there's a risk I'd become an addict. And I know if I was an addict, that there would come a point in my life where nothing mattered to me more than these drugs. And I refuse to put myself in a position for anything to come before my children or my parents or the people I love, to come before the little bit of dignity and pride I have left after going through the judicial system. You know, and I know, like we all know, that if you choose to do drugs, you're likely going to become a drug addict. And if you become a drug addict, there's a good chance this is going to kill you. And, you know, so if a person chooses this, you know, there has to be personal accountability for them. There's not a free pass. So having said all that, you know, my solution is let's look at the underlying issues with the opioid epidemic. First, we'll look at addicts, since that's kind of the big slice of pie. Because the reality is, if you have 50% less addicts, then the value of the drugs drops by 50%, which means selling drugs becomes less lucrative and less appealing, and by default, you will not attract as many new drug dealers to your area, and probably some of the current ones will just leave. Now, if you take 50% drug dealers out of the equation, now this is just basic economics, and I know a lot of people haven't really thought about this, and that's why I mention it, but if you take 50% of the drug dealers out of a community, now the value of those drugs that still exist in the community has doubled, which means crimes related to the drug epidemic, you know, people wanting to buy their drugs, break-ins, robberies, identity theft, you know, all these types of things, car theft, will now double. So it certainly does a lot more damage to a community to have a higher volume of drug addicts versus a higher volume of drug dealers. And, you know, a lot of people don't want to accept that. You know, where I live, like I said, it's the heart of the opioid crisis. So not everybody here has a friend or a family member who has sold drugs, who does sell drugs, you know, that they can be compassionate towards. But everybody here has a friend or family member who they've had to bury because of a drug overdose. Everyone here has a friend or family member, probably many, like myself and most people, who they've tried to save from themselves, from their addiction, you know, and feel a lot of guilt because they've been unsuccessful. You know, so because the drug addict is more relatable to the general population where I live, there's a lot more sympathy for drug addicts versus drug dealers. But really, you have to look at this full spectrum. And if you look at the basic economics of it, You know, a lot of people like to say, oh, shoot your local heroin dealer. So you shoot 50% of the heroin dealers. Now you're doubling the cost of the local heroin, making it more of a commodity, meaning that the likelihood of your loved ones that are on drugs ODing and getting some bad drugs just went up a whole lot. The likelihood of your mother's home being broken into or your children being robbed at gunpoint just went up a whole lot. So if you can, and I would never say shoot your local dealer, shoot your local addict, but if half of the local addicts were no longer addicts, then now the area becomes less attractive to drug dealers. The drug economy here is far less lucrative, and and then the cost to buy the drugs goes down significantly because there's more supply than demand, and so now the crimes related to the drug epidemic have also significantly reduced. So I think our solution here is, first off, we need to address mental illness in our community far more aggressively. And I'm not saying take people who are mentally ill and take them off the street and lock them up. What I'm saying is just as quick as a judge will give a local drug addict, a 6-month stint in a rehab, regardless of what crimes he or she has chose to commit. Why are we not doing some type of at least baseline psych eval or psychiatric background check on people? And if we determine that their crimes are in part because of an underlying mental illness, why are we not saying to, just like we say to the addicts, do you want to do 6 months in rehab or do you want to do 5 years in prison? Why are we not saying to a lot of people, do you want to do 6 months in a secured mental health facility or do you want to do 5 years in prison? Why are we not, when I moved here, because I'm not originally from West Virginia, but when I moved here, I was shocked that so many, almost nobody had ever heard of Job Corps. I grew up in Cleveland. I moved here from New York City. I'm a city girl. And, Job Corps is kind of the lifeblood of second chances for young people. Job Corps is something, and it exists here, by the way, is something where, free room, free board, free education, free clothing, all your basic needs will be met for you for free. So it doesn't matter if you aged out of the system, if you come from a great home, a bad home, none of that matters. You can go to Job Corps and you can get a skilled trade at no cost to you, not have to worry about your basic needs being met. And they will help you with job placement. They will pay for 2 years of your college. This is an incredible opportunity, especially for people living below the federal poverty line. But here in West Virginia, which is classified as rural Appalachia, which is one of the most economically depressed areas in the whole country, most people have never even heard of this resource. And that just shocked me to death. So, let's start at the root of the problem. Instead of having all these military recruiters in and out of high schools every other week trying to scam poor kids into going off and doing the bidding of the federal government, maybe we should be pushing Job Corps. Maybe we should be talking to kids about grant programs if they want to go to college, grant programs if they want to go to trade school. I know a lot of CDL schools. If you sign on with a company, I think Swift does it, U.S. Express might do it, but where if you sign on with a contract with a trucking company, that your first year on the road you'll work for them, they will pay for your education, for you to get your CDL. And your CDL is, you don't have to be book smart. And it's really good money. And it's job security. It's a job that will always be high in demand. And often with benefits. And, these are the things that need to be pushed more. We need programs that push this on our youth. We need programs that say, if you're mentally ill, at least a 2 strike policy on it, if you have some underlying mental illness that's contributed to criminal conduct, our first reaction is going to be to treat the mental illness rather than punish the criminal conduct. Why do you think that there are so many inner city kids, that there's so many, rural kids in trailer parks, that are cooking up meth and bagging up dope and hitting a block? Yes, there's some social pressure. You want to be a person with nice things. You want to impress your peers. This is important to kids. But also, this is like, it's like the goose laying golden eggs, in poor communities is the drug opportunity to sell drugs. And of course, a lot of people are going to take it. So, and when you feel that you have no other options other than McDonald's or be a drug dealer, McDonald's where you're probably going to be degraded and talked down to, and people are going to make fun of you, and you're not going to make much money, and you're going to live hand to mouth. A lot of people take their chances with the drugs. So I say let's create other options. Let's start with the youth and work our way up, creating additional options. In our prison system, let's say a prison gets $300 a day per inmate. The reality is, to house that inmate and stuff, they're probably spending $20-$30 a day. Now you're thinking, well, where's all the rest of that money going? Well, this is why the prison industry is a multi-billion, trillion-dollar business, one of the many reasons, because all that overhead money, that's what buys the CEOs their new cars. That's what gives all these great bonuses to all the executive, people. And it shouldn't be like that. We call ourselves land of the free, but we have the highest per capita incarceration rate of any country in the world. If you were an American, the likelihood that you will be imprisoned at some point in your life, whether you've committed a crime or not, is higher here than in any country in the world you could live in. Think about that. Also, Google plea deal trap. Most people who were incarcerated took a plea deal. And the vast majority, if you speak to them, if they could afford a good paid legal defense, would not have taken a plea deal. Because many of them didn't actually commit a crime. But they know that how the system works, it doesn't matter that they didn't commit a crime. At the end of the day, it's not really going to matter. And you can either take a plea deal and do a little bit of time, or you can go to trial and you will likely do a lot of time. So people take the plea deals. They become felons. They do a little bit of time. And then they come home with all the hurdles that you now have as a convicted felon, which makes their day-to-day living much, much more difficult. From housing to employment to just how society views them, treats them, financial opportunities, loans, small business stuff, just everything. And their life gets kicked out from underneath them. And now they got to come back into the free world and start over from nothing, typically, at a greater disadvantage than they were before they went into prison. So let's have better homeless resources. Let's create, more trade and employment and education opportunities. Now, I know what you're thinking, right? You're thinking, well, all that sounds great. Let's redirect our focus on, instead of incarcerating people in general, whether they be addicts or dealers, let's focus on lining up resources to address the underlying issues that have led them to this lifestyle. And let's give them re-entry and transitional resources to help them, establish a legal, stable, healthy lifestyle for themselves. But someone's got to pay for all that, right? Where's the funding going to come from? I have an answer. And not only do I have an answer for you, but this has worked in other states. Legalize marijuana. Recreationally, medicinally, legalize it and tax the crap out of it. A lot of the local drug addicts will tell you that they didn't start with doing heroin. They started with taking pain medication in excess. And then one day their pain meds were just taken from them. They went through withdrawals and they did a little heroin to kind of, try to right off the withdrawals and take the edge off. And next thing they know, they're needle banging in a Walmart bathroom. If they were only on opioid pain medications for a very brief window of time and then transitioned to medical marijuana, I know a lot of potheads. I've always known a lot of potheads. Friends, family, and otherwise. And I'm going to tell you now, I've never seen a pothead, rob an elderly person or kick in somebody's door or do anything too crazy and violent to get a couple dollars to go get a bag of weed. So economically, especially regarding the crime rate, legalizing marijuana would do us a million favors. We don't have great public schools in West Virginia. We don't have the amount of elderly resources that we really need to thrive as a state. If we allowed marijuana to be legal on the recreational and medicinal levels and we tax the crap out of it, we would now have the revenue for all these services I'm talking about. Better schools, better mental health services, job training, resource allocation, transitional support for those getting out of prison or those becoming sober or those, transitioning from a criminal lifestyle. We would have all that in our hand real fast. Granted, I know Big Pharma is not a fan of the legalized marijuana. I know that the wealthy people like making money, and Big Pharma is a cash cow for them. The prison industry is a cash cow for them. But we, the other 99% of the population, we need to do what's in our best interest, and we need to push for our best interest to be met. Because with the current system, it's not set up for us. It's set up for that 1% to continue to just gain more and more and more and more excessive wealth, while we're sitting here worrying about our houses being broken into all the time by the drug addicts. We're sitting here worried about, whew, damn, you know, if that's a meth lab in my neighbor's garage, I could lose my house. You know, these are the things that we got to worry about. We're worried about, you know, hey, that mentally ill guy outside the 7-Eleven that's always asking for change. What if he gets violent? You know, these are the things that we deal with in day-to-day life that could be minimized greatly, greatly, if we just legalize the marijuana and tax the crap out of it. So that's my solution to, it doesn't solve across the board the opioid epidemic. It doesn't solve across the board the mass incarceration issue or the lacking public schools or the lacking mental health services, but it certainly would put a incredible dent in all of those things. So my resolution to minimizing, from taking the opioid epidemic from an epidemic situation, the mass incarceration situation, from the severity that it is, to minimize all of these things down to more manageable, more livable levels, is legalize marijuana. So let me know what you think. Feel free to like, share, and comment. Hit the dingy bell if you want notifications when I drop new videos. This is Fed Phoenix shooting a bobo with y'all. And I would love your feedback. And you know, there's in the description is my email if you need to contact me directly if you'd like to support the page. My Cash App is the Phoenix 2020. You know, I look forward to hearing your opinions and your perspectives and your feedback. So let's keep it friendly. Let's keep it respectful. We're all adults. And, you know, let's shoot the bobo.